When we talk about empires, especially the British, we often talk about redcoats, kings, taxes, and tea. But the real story of empire isn't just written in parliament halls. It's written in villages burned, promises broken, and alliances betrayed. And nowhere is that clearer than in how Britain treated indigenous nations during its fight for dominance in North America. This is the story of the Collateral Allies. When we talk about the British in North America, we picture redcoats fighting revolutionaries. But before the shots at Lexington and Concord, the British were already locked in a brutal campaign against indigenous nations. From 1754 to 1783, Britain's colonial war machine wasn't just aimed at France or rebellious colonists. It was aimed at indigenous sovereignty. This war is often called the French and Indian War, but that name hides the truth. Indigenous nations were not just helpers. They were strategic powers in their own right. The Haudenosaunee, Lenape, Shawnee, and many more were forced to choose sides as two European empires fought on their land. The British saw them as tools, not partners. When indigenous groups sided with France, the British unleashed brutal campaigns, burning villages, destroying food supplies, and committing acts that would today be called war crimes. When the war ended, the British didn't stop. They expanded. Settlers flooded indigenous lands, violating treaties and boundaries. In response, Odawa leader Pontiac united multiple nations in a powerful resistance. The British response? Total war. They used scorched earth tactics and in one of history's most chilling moments, considered biological warfare smallpox-infected blankets sent into indigenous camps. This was the reality of British Empire promises made in diplomacy, broken by conquest. During the American Revolution, Britain tried a new tactic using indigenous nations as proxy allies. They promised protection of indigenous lands if tribes fought against the colonists. Some nations, like the Mohawk under Joseph Brant, aligned with the British. Others sided with the Americans. The result, indigenous civil war. But when the war ended, so did the charade. In the Treaty of Paris, 1783, Britain handed over huge swaths of indigenous territory to the new United States. They didn't consult their indigenous allies. They didn't honor their promises. They simply handed the land over and sailed home. The British weren't just fighting revolutionaries. They were fighting indigenous sovereignty every step of the way. And when it no longer served them, they abandoned their allies without a second thought. Because to the empire, indigenous nations were never equals. They were collateral allies. For nearly 30 years, Britain used indigenous nations as shields, swords, and scouts, then tossed them aside when the treaties were signed. And what's worse, they weren't alone. Because soon, a new power would rise from the ashes of that war, and it would inherit the jackal's game with sharper teeth and a new flag. Stick around. Because next, we reveal how the United States picked up where Britain left off. Subscribe to Just Another Messenger